Something unprecedented just happened in London, and it's sending shockwaves through both Buckingham Palace and the United States government. For the first time in modern history, a future king has stepped forward not to defend his family, but to publicly distance the crown from it. And at the center of this constitutional earthquake, an investigation that's unraveling millions of dollars, a collapsed luxury brand, and questions that strike at the very heart of what it means to wear a royal title. This isn't gossip. This is a reckoning. London, February 11th. The air was cold, but the words that came from Prince William's lips were colder still. Standing on the south steps of Marlborough House at precisely 10 a.m., the Prince of Wales addressed a packed global press corps. His tone was measured, his posture unshakable, and his message crystal clear. "Let no one mistake silence for consent," he began. "The Crown does not endorse, finance, or associate itself with the Archewell Foundation or its subsidiaries. Our role is to protect the constitutional integrity of this institution, and we will act with full transparency when that integrity is questioned." The room went silent. Cameras clicked. Journalists scribbled furiously. This wasn't a casual statement. This was a line being drawn in the sand. And it was aimed directly at Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. But why now? What could possibly force the future king to make such a public, almost unprecedented declaration? The answer lies in a letter that arrived at Buckingham Palace just 2 days earlier, not from a tabloid, not from a royal biographer, but from the United States Internal Revenue Service. The IRS had officially launched an investigation into the Archewell Foundation, and they had 3 very specific questions. First, had any British royal entity ever financially or symbolically endorsed Archewell? Second, had any royal title or insignia been used in American commercial ventures without permission? And third, was there intentional misrepresentation of royal support in tax and fundraising materials? The stakes couldn't be higher, because if the answers pointed to yes, this wouldn't just be a PR problem, it would be fraud, it would be a breach of public trust. And it would implicate the monarchy itself unless they acted fast. Within 48 hours, the palace didn't just respond, they opened the vault. Senior officials from the royal household, HM Treasury, and the Royal Trust sat down with investigators from the IRS's International Tax Crimes Unit. It wasn't a courtesy call, it was a data dump. Bank records, communications logs, internal warnings, licensing agreements, or rather, the complete lack of them. Every document told the same story. The Crown had never authorized Archewell, never funded it, never endorsed it, and more than that, they'd actively tried to stop certain behaviors for years. One palace source described the IRS agents as stunned by the level of cooperation. Another called it the most transparent cross-border audit collaboration they'd ever seen from a historic institution. And that's when things started to spiral. Here's where the story gets uncomfortable. Because once investigators started digging into Archewell's finances, the numbers didn't just raise eyebrows, they raised red flags. Let's talk about 2024. Archewell Foundation reported bringing in just over $2 million in donations. That's a steep drop from the $5 million they raised the year before. Already donor trust was eroding. But here's the kicker. While they brought in $2 million, they spent over $5 million. Where did that money go? Well, $1.25 million went to actual charitable grants. That's the mission, right? That's what donors expect. But then there's this. $913,000 went to salaries. For 2 employees, let that sink in. 2 people, nearly $1 million. Now, if those 2 people were seasoned nonprofit executives with decades of experience running multi-million-dollar operations, maybe you could justify it. But according to sources familiar with the organization, neither individual had that kind of background. And it gets worse. Almost $3 million, almost $3 million, went to what the foundation categorized as administrative and security costs. So out of every dollar donated to Archewell, only about 25 cents actually made it to a charitable cause. The rest, overhead, travel, security details, consultants. For a charity with a limited program footprint and minimal staffing, this cost structure doesn't look like a nonprofit. It looks like a private enterprise disguised as one. One IRS official put it bluntly, this resembles a personal expense account more than a public charity. But the Archewell Foundation wasn't the only venture under scrutiny. Because while the foundation was bleeding donor confidence, Meghan Markle was launching something else entirely, a luxury lifestyle brand. It was called American Riviera Orchard. And on paper, it sounded beautiful. Artisan fruit preserves, hand-poured candles, herbal teas, decorative home goods, all wrapped in elegant packaging with taglines like "Inspired by Legacy" and "By Royal Ritual." The branding was unmistakable: soft serif fonts that echoed royal stationery, stylized crown motifs, a color palette of royal blue and gold. Even the packaging design bore a striking resemblance to official Windsor gift presentations used during Christmas at Buckingham Palace. Critics immediately raised concerns. Was this an homage, or was this appropriation? The initial launch made headlines. Press releases claimed the products sold out within hours. Meghan's team celebrated, influencers posted. The media ran glowing features about her entrepreneurial comeback. But then something strange happened. A glitch on the brand's website accidentally revealed back-end inventory data, and the truth was devastating. The products hadn't sold out, not even close. In fact, over $23 million worth of unsold stock was sitting in warehouses across North America. Let me break that down for you. 137,000 jars of fruit preserves, untouched. 44,000 jars of Windsor orange marmalade, still on the shelves. 80,000 floral sachets, zero movement. And here's the most damning statistic of all. During a major birthday promotion tied to Meghan herself, a 24-hour flash sale in late January, the brand sold exactly 26 units. 26, in an entire day, with a targeted marketing push. That's not a sold-out success story. That's a commercial collapse. And investigators started asking a very uncomfortable question. If the brand was failing this badly, and if Archewell's donations were plummeting, why did the foundation suddenly restructure itself in June of 2025? Because that's exactly what happened. Archewell quietly shifted to something called a fiscal sponsorship model. Essentially, they placed themselves under the umbrella of another nonprofit. And while that's not illegal, it does something very convenient. It shields them from having to file their own detailed public tax forms. Translation: far less transparency, far fewer questions. The timing, investigators noted, was suspicious. The restructure happened right as media outlets started asking hard questions about spending, about governance, about whether the foundation was living up to its charitable mission. One line from an IRS memo stands out. This pattern is consistent with entities attempting to conceal operational deficiencies. In other words, this looked like someone trying to hide something. Now, you might be wondering, what does any of this have to do with the royal family? Meghan and Harry stepped back from royal duties years ago. They moved to California. They're private citizens now, right? Well, not exactly, because while they may have left the institution, they didn't leave the titles behind. Meghan Markle still uses the title Duchess of Sussex. It's on her website, it's in her podcast credits, it's on book covers, media appearances, and yes, it's been used in connection with Archewell's promotional materials, and that's where the legal trouble begins. Because a royal title isn't just a name, it's not a brand, it's a constitutional designation. It carries the weight of the crown. It implies endorsement, legacy, continuity. And according to the palace, Meghan never had permission to use that title commercially. In fact, internal documents show that the royal household sent multiple warnings to representatives of the Sussexes, starting as far back as 2021. The message was clear: stop using royal imagery, stop implying royal affiliation, stop leveraging the crown for private gain. Those warnings were ignored. And then came the moment that changed everything. During a 2023 public appearance at the Aspen Impact Forum, Meghan said something that sent alarm bells ringing all the way to Westminster. She said, and this is a direct quote, "Archewell represents not just our family, but a legacy of service that the Crown instilled in us." That single sentence triggered a cascade. Because to American donors and regulators, that sounds like royal endorsement. It sounds like this foundation is connected to, maybe even supported by, the British monarchy. But it wasn't. It never was. And now U.S. authorities were asking the palace directly, "Did you approve this?" The answer was a resounding no. On February 16th, just days after William's public statement, something extraordinary happened behind closed doors. A private meeting was held at Clarence House. On one side of the table sat Prince William, flanked by the palace's chief legal counsel, the director of institutional ethics for the Royal Trust, and a senior representative from HM Treasury. On the other side, Peter Howard, the senior director for international tax crimes at the IRS, along with U.S. Embassy, legal liaisons, and federal auditors. This wasn't a diplomatic courtesy. This was a 2-hour operational briefing, and William came prepared. He brought documents, side-by-side comparisons of American Riviera orchard packaging and official royal Christmas gift boxes. The similarities were undeniable. He brought transcripts, archived speeches where Meghan repeatedly referenced royal tradition, Windsor values, and a continuation of service. He brought internal warnings, emails sent from the palace to Sussex representatives urging them to stop using specific imagery and language in their commercial ventures. And then, according to sources in the room, William said something that cut to the core of the issue. This is not theoretical. The harm has already occurred. In donor trust, in public perception, and in the international understanding of what the crown represents. We are not speaking now to deflect it, we are working to repair it. The IRS took notes, lots of them, and just days later they issued a formal acknowledgement. The royal family had been fully cooperative, transparent, thorough, and more importantly, they were cleared. The crown had no entanglement with Archewell, no financial ties, no endorsements, no liability. But Meghan, that was a different story. In the days following William's public declaration and the IRS summit, the consequences came fast and hard. American Riviera Orchard's website went dark. The homepage was replaced with a vague message about technical maintenance. But insiders knew the truth. The brand was imploding. Major retail partners began backing out. Fortnum and Mason, Harrods, Hudson Bay, all of them quietly suspended or terminated their distribution agreements. Warehouse operators in New Jersey and Ontario refused to accept new shipments. Some even threatened to auction off unpaid inventory just to clear space. And then came the legal hammer. The Royal Trust's legal office delivered a formal cease and desist order to Evermark Collective, the parent company behind American Riviera Orchard. The violations listed were damning: packaging and promotional language that mimicked royal gift aesthetics, unauthorized use of phrases like Windsor blend and by royal ritual, inclusion of stylized crowns and color palettes historically reserved for the monarchy. The message was clear: stop using our symbols, stop trading on our legacy, or face legal action. At the same time, the royal household issued something even more significant: a formal reputational disavowal of the Archewell Foundation. They submitted updated documents to charity regulators in the US, Canada, and the UK, making it explicitly clear the Crown does not endorse this organization. It never has. And any implication otherwise is false. This wasn't just paperwork. This was the monarchy protecting itself, aggressively. And it didn't stop there. The palace updated its entire compliance protocol. New rules were put in place, rules that apply to all former working royals. Rule 1. Any use of a royal title in connection with fundraising, product sales, or media content now requires pre-clearance from the Lord Chamberlain's office. Rule 2. Any reference to the crown, royal service, or visual imagery that evokes Windsor emblems must be documented and disclosed before public release. Rule 3. Any business or foundation that implies it continues the work or spirit of the royal family must include a disclaimer, in bold, stating, "Not affiliated with the British monarchy." These weren't suggestions. These were enforceable standards, and they were retroactive. Meanwhile, the IRS was tightening its grip. Investigators requested specific records showing where and how Meghan had used the Duchess of Sussex title in branded materials. They wanted contracts, partnership agreements, emails with corporate sponsors. They wanted to know if the title had been used to secure book deals, podcast contracts, media interviews, and if so, whether donors or partners were misled into thinking they were supporting something connected to the royal family. One internal memo, dated May 2024, was particularly revealing. It came from the palace's brand protection unit and warned in no uncertain terms that continued use of royal titles without institutional backing could constitute reputational misrepresentation and provide grounds for civil review under UK trademark law. In simpler terms, you can't use a royal title to sell stuff, not without permission, and definitely not if you're misleading people in the process. But perhaps the most stunning revelation came from an unexpected source. A former Archewell executive assistant, now cooperating with federal investigators, handed over internal communications. The emails referenced something called a selective transparency strategy. Another mentioned post-royal branding. A third discussed efforts to maintain donor trust through what they called legacy language. Translation? They knew exactly what they were doing. They were using royal language, royal imagery, and royal titles as marketing leverage, deliberately. And now it was all coming undone. As the evidence mounted, a question began circulating in both Westminster and Washington. A question that hadn't been seriously considered in decades. Could the royal family actually revoke Meghan and Harry's titles? Legally, yes. Constitutionally, it's complicated, but precedent does exist. In 1917, during World War I, King George V used the Titles Deprivation Act to strip British nobles of their titles if they were deemed to be acting against the interests of the nation. It was a wartime measure, sure, but the legal framework still stands. And while we're not talking about treason here, we are talking about something the palace considers just as serious: the erosion of institutional trust. Because here's the thing: the monarchy doesn't run on power anymore. It runs on symbolism, on perception, on the belief that the crown represents something bigger than any one person: duty, service, integrity. And when someone uses that symbolism to enrich themselves, when they trade on the legacy of the institution while distancing themselves from its responsibilities, that's not just bad optics, that's a constitutional problem. Prince William made that abundantly clear in his public remarks. Titles bestowed within the crown are not trade assets, he said. They are not shields for profit nor tools for branding. They are symbolic duties held in public trust. And now that principle is being tested. The Privy Council, a body of senior advisors to the monarch, has convened a special subcommittee. Their task? To review whether the continued use of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex titles in connection with commercial and non-profit activities constitutes grounds for suspension or revocation. It's not a decision they're taking lightly. But according to sources close to the process, King Charles has already reviewed draft language for a potential revocation order. And while he's maintaining public distance from the proceedings, insiders say he has no objection in principle if statutory misuse is confirmed. This would be historic. A sitting royal, stripped of their title not for scandal in the tabloid sense, but for violating the very principles the title is meant to represent. And the clock is ticking. A final ruling is expected by March. But the fallout isn't waiting for a verdict, it's already happening. Charity rating organizations like Charity Navigator and GuideStar have updated Archewell's profile to reflect its pending federal audit status. That's a red flag for any potential donor. The California Attorney General's office has reopened a compliance inquiry from 2023, citing new evidence of potentially false claims in state-level nonprofit filings, and the IRS has made it clear: if misreported funds are confirmed, particularly money spent on private security, luxury travel, or public relations, Archewell could face civil fraud penalties of up to 75% of the misused amount. There's also the very real possibility that the foundation could lose its tax-exempt status entirely. And if that happens, donors who claimed tax deductions for their contributions could be audited as well. It's a cascading disaster. And at the center of it all is a woman who, just a few years ago, was one of the most famous people on the planet. Now she's facing potential legal penalties, brand liquidation, and the very real possibility of losing the one thing that still ties her to the institution she left behind: her title. So where does this leave us? On one side, you have the British monarchy, an institution that has survived wars, revolutions, scandals, and centuries of change. And now it's facing a different kind of threat, not from outside forces, but from within its own extended family. And its response has been swift, strategic, and uncompromising. Prince William's decision to step forward publicly was not impulsive, it was calculated. It was a message to the world that the crown will not be leveraged, that service and commerce are not the same thing, and that anyone, regardless of their connection to the institution, will be held accountable if they exploit its legacy for personal gain. As one senior palace aide put it, this is not political, it's protective. We're protecting the institution from reputational erosion, legal ambiguity, and the misuse of inherited symbolism. Prince William said it best in a private remark that later made its way to the press: "The world must know there is a line. Not every name carries meaning, but ours must carry the truth. It's a trust, a responsibility, a line of continuity that stretches back centuries and must be safeguarded for the future." And on February 11th, in front of the world, Prince William made one thing perfectly clear: that line will not be crossed, not by anyone, not even a duchess. The crown is not for sale, and no one, not even those born into it, is above its duty. This isn't just a scandal, it's a constitutional moment. A turning point where the old rules of royalty collided with the new realities of celebrity culture, and the institution chose to fight back. The investigation continues. The consequences are still unfolding, and the world is watching. because when a future king draws a line, everyone pays attention.